Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm starting off my new Shining Gold Tales marathon for you guys. And the first video I'm reacting to is three true chilling Home Alone horror stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road in the bag, shall we? Okay, here we go.
My name is Jeff, and this story is about one of the first times that my parents left me home alone. I was probably 12 or 13 at the time. I would be left on my own from around the age of 10. I guess that's a little young for most, but that's what we did. My mom would always tell me not to answer the door or phone when I was alone. However, I would break the rules sometimes. Usually just to answer the phone, because if it was one of my friends, then I didn't want to miss out.
That does sound a little bit too young. 10? My parents wouldn't let me stay home around that age. They started to feel more comfortable with me staying home by myself when I was like 13 through 16 at least. But anyway, let's continue on with this story and see what happens next.
My father was away on business at the time, and my mom was out doing something. I can't remember what. It was about 8 p.m., and I was in the living room watching TV. Then I heard the doorbell ring. I ignored it at first and continued watching. Then it rang again. I got up and walked to the front of the house. I wasn't going to answer it. I was just curious, and I thought I could peek out the window and see who it was. I carefully moved the curtains aside and pressed my face against the glass. He was a middle-aged man in some kind of uniform. He looked like a mechanic or some kind of repairman. He wore a blue-collared shirt and a name tag, but I couldn't read it. I was watching him for a few seconds when he looked over at me. I was caught. He smiled and waved at me and said, "Hey there, son. We got a report of a gas leak. Can you let me in?" I quickly closed the curtains and took a step away from the window. I knew that I wasn't supposed to open the door when I was alone, but if there was a gas leak, then that could be bad. I reluctantly turned the deadbolt and opened the door.
Oh, no. Why'd you do it? Now you're gonna let this creep person who claims to be a gas line mechanic walk into your house. I bet you he's just trying to get in just so he could steal something or probably kidnap you. Man, I would just seen who he was walk back from the window before he looked towards my direction and call my parents just to ask if there's supposed to be a guy coming over here to check a gas line leak problem. And if they say no, then I'm calling the cops. Oh boy, this is already getting creepy.
The man was really quite friendly and jovial. He told me that he needed to come in to check the gas lines. I told him that I'm not supposed to be alone with strangers, and he asked me if he could talk to my mom or dad. That was when a chill ran down my spine. I realized that if I admitted to being alone, then he could do whatever he wanted. He was probably fishing for information as soon as I opened the door. I tried to think of a lie, but the best I could come up with was to say that my dad was in the shower. That would only buy me a few minutes. Tension built while we stood there, pretending that everything was all right. I almost started crying at one point. Then I saw one of my neighbors across the street walking her dog. She immediately noticed me standing there on the porch with a strange man and must have known that something was wrong. As soon as the man saw her coming, he turned around and walked back to his van, then drove off. My neighbor asked me who that was. I told her what had happened and that he was with the gas company, that there was a leak. Then she calmly told me to stay in the house while she called my mom. My mom rushed home, and when she heard what happened, she called the police. It was then that I realized how serious the situation was. We never found out who that guy was, but when my mom called the gas company, they said they hadn't sent anyone and that there was no leak.
Yep, I knew it. Had to be an imposter gas company guy. Thinking that he could just sneak in and probably either steal something or worse, kidnap whoever's in the house. Thank God the neighbor was just outside walking her dog and gave that guy a sign to leave, because if she weren't around, something bad might have happened to either the kid or the house would have been wrecked. But man, I hope the police find that dude and arrest him, because that's not right. Scaring the crap out of a family, just saying that there was a gas leak just so they could get in the house. But I know that kid is more wiser now. If somebody tries to pull another stunt like that, then he'll know to not let him in. But anyway, let's get to story number 2, shall we?
I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I used to live in a shared house with a few of my friends from college. It had been about 5 years since we graduated, but we all managed to find work in the same city, so we decided to move in together. This story took place during Thanksgiving of last year. My roommates had all gone to spend the occasion with their families. I, however, don't have the best relationship with my parents, so I stayed and had the house to myself. Besides, there was a work event that I wanted to go to, just a little get-together at a local bar. We had a few drinks and talked about work for a while, and after 2 hours, I decided to call it a night early. I decided that I'd rather watch some Netflix and go to sleep at a reasonable hour. I called an Uber and stood on the sidewalk waiting. The car pulled up and I got in, taking the back seat. The driver was about 45 years old with a bald head. He was very friendly and talkative, and although I didn't really feel like talking, I didn't want to be rude. He asked me some mundane questions about what I was up to that night. I told him that I was out with my coworkers and that my roommates were away for Thanksgiving. He laughed awkwardly, then said, "So you're home alone?"
Why did you tell him that? If you didn't want to hang out with your co-workers and just wanted to chill by yourself at home, I can completely understand that. But if you're getting a ride from an Uber and they asked you about that, you should say, "Oh, I'm just going to chill at home with my roommates." Then he'll know that you probably are not going to be alone. Because I got a bad feeling that this Uber driver might just drop her off and then come back trying to sneak inside the house. But I'm just guessing at this point, so let's just continue on with the story before I keep guessing.
Then he looked back at me with a smile. I immediately got a feeling in the pit of my stomach when I realized what I had done. I should have never told a stranger that I was home alone, especially because I had already given him my address. I tried not to dwell on it, though. He was probably harmless, I thought. We eventually made it to my house, and I got out of the car. I walked to my front door and stepped inside. Once I locked the front door, I peered out the window and breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the car drive away. I went to my room and got into bed. I was watching something on my laptop when I heard a noise from downstairs. It was a long creaking sound, like somebody was opening a door really slowly.
Please don't tell me that Uber driver came back. She shouldn't have been thinking like, "Oh, he's harmless. He's just wanted to start a little conversation." He's going to take all your answers to his questions seriously, and then he'll know that now you're alone in the house and he's going to do whatever he wants to. I will quietly get up to investigate, but if you see that man, hide quickly and call the cops before he leaves or does anything bad to you.
My stomach turned when I realized that I couldn't remember if I had locked the back door. I didn't even check. I quickly closed my laptop and placed it on my nightstand. Then I walked to my door and stood there listening. At this point, I wasn't sure if there was anyone in the house, so I wanted to make sure before calling the police. With my ear firmly pressed against the door, I could hear the faint sound of footsteps coming from downstairs. Someone was in the house. I almost panicked, but somehow managed to stay in control. I moved my dresser in front of the door, but when I did, the footsteps became louder and quicker. Now I realized that doing so revealed my location in the house. He was coming for me. I ran into my closet and dialed 911. Whispering into the phone, the operator told me to stay calm and that the police would be there in 5 minutes. 5 minutes sounded like an eternity, but I knew I could make it. Just then, I started to hear pounding on my bedroom door. Neither of us said a word, but the door was opening. The dresser wouldn't hold him for long. Then I shouted out that the police were on their way. I guess that was enough to scare him, and he stopped trying to get in. That was when the sweet sound of police sirens emerged from the distance. A few long minutes later, a female officer knocked on my door and said that it was safe to come out. She told me that they had arrested the guy and had him in custody. I then told her about the creepy experience I had with the Uber driver earlier in the evening. It was then that we walked out to the street. I saw my tormentor sitting there in the back of a police car. It was him, my Uber driver from that night. I had no idea what would have happened if I hadn't heard the door opening that evening. What if I had gone to sleep earlier? Either way, this was the most terrifying experience of my life, and if you're ever home alone, whatever you do, don't tell a stranger.
Oh, believe me, I wouldn't do that either. But thank God you were alert to realize that somebody was walking in your home and moved your dresser in front of the door and called the cops. Because if you didn't, he would have been grabbing you or doing some dirty stuff to you while you were asleep. And if you decide to go upstairs, make sure all the windows and doors are locked downstairs because you don't want nothing like this happening. But I'm just glad that she's okay and did not have to worry about this guy no more. But she's more careful on who she talks to and what to say when another Uber driver or some other stranger asks her a question.
When I was growing up, my mom used to work the late shifts as a nurse at a retirement home. Her shifts would start at 6 p.m. and go until 2 a.m. She used to get a babysitter for my brother Andrew and I, but as soon as we were old enough, we would be on our own. That was fine with us because we felt really mature and grown up having the house to ourselves. Neither my brother nor I were really troublemakers by anybody's standards. We were actually pretty good students. We'd get our homework done on our own, then usually just watch TV and hang out afterwards. We were sitting on the couch in front of the TV. Our living room was at the front of the house, and there was a window next to the TV, so we could see the street and sidewalk out of our peripheral vision while we watched. It was a quiet night, but there were a few cars passing by, and also one or two people walking down the street. I eventually started to notice something strange. I had seen the same van pass our window at least 3 times. It was an older gray minivan, probably from the late 90s. I turned my attention away from the TV and started watching the street more closely. After I saw it another time, I told my brother. He hadn't noticed because he was focused on the show. The both of us sat there, looking out the window, and sure enough, we saw the same van another 2 times within 3 minutes.
You know, if I heard a car kept going back and forth, I would have passed it off as different vehicles just going one direction from another. You look outside the window and you see the same van going back and forth, and something is really off. Might be potential kidnappers just seeing if anybody was home, or people that were planning on robbing the place and they were just making sure that nobody was up. They wanted to go in there stealthily and take the stuff and go. But I don't know what's going to happen here, so I'm going to hit the play button and stop talking just to see what happens next.
This guy was just driving back and forth on our street. It seemed strange, but we didn't worry too much at first, because maybe he was lost. We noticed it pass by another few times and started to get concerned. Both of us were now fixated on the window, but after another few minutes, it seemed to stop. We were both relieved and went back to the TV. After a few episodes of whatever we were watching, it was starting to get late, and my brother and I decided to go to bed. Andrew went upstairs, while I got up from the couch and walked past the window. That's when I noticed something terrifying. That old van was parked in front of our house on the street, just out of view of where we were sitting. I quickly closed the curtains, then slid them open a crack to peek through. There was a man sitting in the front seat of the van. Had he just been sitting there this whole time? I thought. I couldn't really make out any details about him, but one thing did strike me. His eyes had a seriously disturbing look. The reflection of the bright streetlights gave them an evil, yellowish glow. I don't think he saw me behind the curtains, but he was definitely looking at our house. I called up to Andrew and told him to come downstairs. He looked out the window to see the man sitting there in the driver's seat of the van. I think he saw me, my brother cried. We were terrified, and after some discussion, we decided to call our mom at work. My brother and I took pride in being able to take care of ourselves, so we didn't like to bother mom at work, but this was serious. As soon as we told her what was happening, she raced home. Less than 15 minutes later, I watched her car pull into the driveway. I then turned my attention to the spot where I saw the van, and it was gone. He had taken off, probably as soon as my mom got home. We never found out who that guy was or why he was there. My mom did call the police, but there was really nothing they could do. We didn't even get a license plate number. This incident shook all three of us to the core, and for another year or so after, my mom started getting a babysitter again.
Okay, if that ever happened around here, which I hope don't happen, I would have been looking out the window with binoculars and trying to zoom in on the license plate just so I can write it down, and when we call the cops, boom, you got the guys. The guys took off because once they saw mom coming in, their whole game plan was changed. They probably were scoping around the area and they were probably planning on sneaking into that house, but they didn't know that there were some kids there watching movies, and they called their mom because they were riding around in their van, acting suspiciously. But thankfully they did, and they don't have to worry about these people anymore, hopefully. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more shiny gold tails reactions like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap, and that's Dago.